In reality, she knew she had a lot more than that, like disapproving parents, and a failed engagement, and a best friend who lived 3,000 miles away and hadn't responded to her last 4 texts. And let's not forget a love life that made her want to drill a hole through her skull. Add uncertain financial future to the list, and she was a veritable cornucopia of success. "I'm good, thanks," she said, as calmly as she could, then said a quick goodbye before she could add victim of catnapping to her list of accolades. She grabbed both carrier handles and hauled them to her 10-year-old turquoise Mini Cooper, which was already stuffed to overflowing. She didn't look at her house as she backed out of the driveway, nor did she mentally acknowledge the lump rising in her throat. And she definitely didn't glance at Wanderlust Inc. as she drove through downtown, her tattoo shop, which she'd only just closed 4 weeks ago. Permanently. She'd been fighting against the decision for over a year. Just 6 months ago, she'd let Matt go, her only employee who was now working at a fancy shop in Concord, but that had hardly fixed April's financial woes. A small town like Clover Lake had only so many regular clients, and the summer crowd was no longer keeping her in the black. She'd lived in the red for the last 2 years, but when she started struggling to pay for high-quality ink and other crucial supplies, she knew it was time to throw in the proverbial towel. So, about a month ago, she'd referred her regulars to Mac, flipped the sign to closed on her shop door, and proceeded to spend the next week on her couch eating jalapeno Cheetos and trying to will Paris and Rory from Gilmore Girls to kiss. Needless to say, they never smashed, and April had to face the reality of her situation, which was how she ended up renting out her home, packing her bags for the summer, and taking a job teaching art classes at Cloverwild, the ritzy new resort opening in just a few days on the North Shore. The position came with room and board, a tiny lakeside cabin complete with a cabin mate, and the owner, Mia Gallagher, had asked absolutely 0 questions about April's suddenly wide-open summer schedule and need for housing when she'd applied. April hadn't exactly told anyone about closing her business. Not her parents. Not her best friend, Ramona. Only Bianca and Bob knew her secrets, and they weren't talking. In Clover Lake, it was only a matter of time before the news broke. But she'd like to maintain her dignity as long as possible. She pulled into a parking spot in front of Clover Moon Cafe, then stepped out into the warm June sunshine. The New Hampshire weather wouldn't get truly hot until July, so she cracked the windows, promised Bianca and Bob she'd only be a second, then ducked into the cafe for some coffee. She'd already enjoyed 1 cup this morning in her quaint kitchen, soaking up the way the pale sunlight streamed through her vintage-style windows for the last time. But she needed another hit to get through this day. She stepped inside, the bell over the door dinging, and took in the familiar vibe of Clover Moon. All rustic wood, navy and green accents, and mismatched chairs. She slid onto a bar stool and smiled at the owner, Owen, a bald man in his late 40s, covered in tattoos, a lot of which April had done herself. "Usual latte, please," April said. "Oat milk if you've got it." "I've got it," he said, wiping down the counter in front of her. "Triple?" "Do I look like a woman who wants a small amount of caffeine right now?" April asked, pointing at the bags under her eyes. Owen pressed his mouth together. "I'm going to shut my mouth and get to work on a quad-shot oat milk latte." "Good man," April said, then rested her elbows on the counter. Behind her, the cafe buzzed with activity from the usual clientele. Violet Chalmers sipping on a mocha latte spiked with a few dribbles of Bailey's that she kept in her purse. Duke Hansard and his brother Jake with their daily helping of sausage links wrapped in buttermilk pancakes, then smothered in strawberry syrup. Logan and Natalie Adler fighting about what to name their soon-to-be-born twins. Personally, April liked Natalie's most recent favorites, Maple and Oak.